reflect those of KXVS, the Voice of Stockton, or its parents, affiliates, management, and staff.
There we go. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another amazing episode of the Phone Booth here on KBCC, the Voice of San Joaquin. My name is Ed Heitman, and joining me in the studio, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Brian Rodriguez.
Hello.
How you doing today, man?
Full of emotions.
Oh, I bet, man, I bet. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday, around 4 o'clock or so, we were able to finally get a glimpse, actually no, we were actually fully watch Avengers Endgame. The little ribbon, the little bow on the present of 11 years worth of the Avengers films.
Now don't worry, we won't be spoiling anything. We are not doing a review this episode. That will be next week.
Yeah, we figured, we don't want to spoil it for anybody, especially because of the fact that, Endgame is a very important film. However, we are going to give you a week's time. We're going to give you guys, a whole week to go watch it yourself and everything, so you ain't got to worry about no spoilers. You don't got to hide under no rocks or anything because, trust me, we know what it's like to have to hide under a rock and avoid spoilers. But instead, we're going to have ourselves a little Marvel special today. In particular, we're going to be going over the timeline, starting, from Captain America, the first Avenger, all the way up to Ant-Man and the Wasp, in order to give you a kind of a full recourse on everything that has happened leading up to this epic conclusion. Of course, as always, though, we do have a little bit of news topics to talk about, though today we are going to skip trailer talk because we kind of want to focus more on the timeline in particular. But I want to start off with the first little bit of news here, one that has me very, very relieved. Now, if you're a reoccurring guest to our show, you're a reoccurring viewer to our show, you might know that we've talked about an actress known as Fan Bingbing for quite a while, and with great concern, in fact, because she had disappeared for a good period of time.
Yeah, it's been about a year since her last public appearance, but she is back now. Now, if you haven't been following this story or just haven't kept up with it because it sort of went cold, Fan Bingbing is a Chinese actress who appeared in X-Men Days of Future Past as... I don't remember who she appeared as.
I believe she was Blink, a mutant who had the ability to create portals.
Yeah, she was Blink. But anyway, she was accused of tax fraud by the Chinese government for using what are called yin-yang contracts, which are essentially where actors sign one contract that they give to the government and then another contract that's the real one that usually has much more money on it. It's essentially a double-entry bookkeeping.
Basically, yes. And because of this, she had been gone for quite a while. Mm-hmm. But we are very happy to say that she has finally reappeared. You see, Fan Bingbing, the Chinese actress, she made a recent appearance at a gala, was it?
Yeah, some sort of corporate gala in Beijing. I couldn't figure out what company it was for, but it was... She posted photos on Instagram, which actually is banned in China, so it was really just for her, international fans, I guess. Mm-hmm. She did offer an apology some months ago, back when this news story broke, to the Chinese government. She, took responsibility, said she'd be better. But it was concerning, because for a while before that, she had just completely disappeared. And given the, let's call it the reputation of the Chinese government, it was not entirely clear what had happened to her.
Yeah. We're just glad to hear that she's safe and sound, we were very greatly concerned, because given all the rumors we had heard from people about what happens when somebody kind of disappears, and that was the term that was given to her too, not abducted, not kidnapped, disappeared. It can only make you kind of worry, it kind of seemed like something bad was going to happen. So it's quite a relief to hear that she's okay. It's a huge sigh of relief, I guess. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and take away the next little topic, though.
So, Epic and NetherRealm, the studios behind Fortnite and Mortal Kombat, have both been accused of having excessive crunch cultures, with it being normalized to have work weeks of 70 to 100 hours, which is absurd. Mm-hmm. Now, Epic seems to have done this in order to keep up with the constant flow of content for Fortnite, with the weekly patches and new weapons, modes, things like that. It's not an excuse for treating your employees this way, but that does seem to be the reason for it happening. NetherRealm, however, doesn't appear to really have much of a reason besides poor management. It's been reported by many former NetherRealm employees that the crunch was actually planned and scheduled as such. It wasn't just, a last minute, oh my god, we need to shout this content. Oh, do it because you love the craft and because you love the game. No, this was mandated and scheduled. In fact, one developer described there as being pre-crunch to get ready for the crunch, which is absolutely insane. Employees were expected to work from 10 a.m. until midnight, except, of course, the executives who got to leave after dinner, which is one of the most infuriating parts of this, is that they knew this was insane, and that's why they left. And they knew they could leave because they could make their subordinates do the work for them. And honestly, this entire thing is infuriating.
Well, honestly, man, having to do crunch, period, is pretty infuriating. We've had to deal with quite a few companies that have been, doing crunch time. Telltale Games was very pressuring on the employees.
Telltale Games.
Rockstar was recently in a huge controversy regarding Red Dead Redemption 2, how they basically bragged that they were doing crunch time.
CD Projekt Red has been known for its excessive crunch time. BioWare. And I'd like to offer an apology, because when the BioWare news broke, I was actively against us talking about it in detail because it had just become so exhausting at this point with all the reports on crunch, and I'd become convinced that there was nothing we could really do about it by just keeping talking about it, and it was just taking up time. And I'm sorry for that, because these developers deserve to have these stories told. Even we don't have a huge audience, I know that, I'm aware of that. But even one more person knowing that this story and knowing that it's not right makes it worth talking about. Because these are human beings, and they deserve better than my apathy and my exhaustion. Yeah, but they deserve better than all this. So I'm going to keep talking about this. I'm going to keep talking about this every time it comes up. I'm not going to let them get away with this. I'm not going to let these game developers win by just hoping we get tired of talking about it, because that's what they want. They know that eventually we'll get tired of talking about it, or they're hoping we'll get tired of talking about it, so they can keep doing this without any repercussions. And I don't want to let them win, because these are human lives. These are human beings.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we do need to talk about, because when you think about it, this kind of thing wouldn't really fly in any other field of business, especially due to the fact that other fields of businesses, they have things like unions, people who try their best to make sure that employees don't have to deal with something as ridiculous and as insulting as crunch time. However, for some reason in the video games industry, we do not have a union. And that's one thing that we desperately need right now. We need more rights for the people who are working on video games, because it's not right for them to have to go through all of this,
It's insane. No other industry works this way.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, man. But anyways, on to a little bit more, lighthearted news.
Oh, I really should have formatted this script better, because this is sort of a weird one to move on to. Anyway, Fortnite, the game we were just bashing for crunch time, has introduced a new Avengers crossover called Fortnite Endgame. So this is actually similar to last year's Infinity War crossover, where essentially the Infinity Gauntlet would spawn on the map, and whoever got it would become Thanos with a host of superpowers, and It eventually actually had to be nerfed partway through the event because it was so OP. Now this one works similar, but a bit differently. So now it's its own game type. It's not part of the main game. And how it works is there are two teams. One of them is the Avengers, and the other is Thanos and a group of Chitauri minions. So how it works is each team spawns with a treasure map, and they have to go around the map finding the Infinity Stones to get certain buffs and, like extra health, extra shields, extra damage. See, if the Chitauri manage to get them, they get the buffs as well as Thanos getting even more of a boost to power. So essentially, it's the Avengers trying to get the stones before Thanos does, and he becomes overpowered and wipes them all out.
Now, I have to admit, that game mode sounds very interesting. You know, I remember a lot of people really enjoyed the Thanos mode, you know, getting the Infinity Gauntlet. I heard a whole host of superpowers. You could obliterate buildings quite easily.
Yeah.
Though I did hear that once it got nerfed, it wasn't as enjoyable, you know.
Well,
but-
yeah, it got nerfed because it was overpowered, and there were complaints that it was... Because it was just in the main game. It wasn't in its own game mode, so it did sort of throw off some, you know, competitive aspects of the game for, I believe it was 2 weeks?
I want to say so, yeah.
Yeah, which is never great for this type of game, and I think it's a good idea that they both reworked it and made it its own game mode.
I agree, man. I agree. And I think it was a good idea to have its own little game mode. After all, there is more to Fortnite than just Battle Royale. There was the whole Save the World mode that I believe it originated with before it did Battle Royale.
Yeah, they sort of retrofitted Battle Royale out of it to sort of piggyback on PUBG, and now it's the king.
Yeah, well, I mean...
But Save the World is still getting updates, which I think is nice.
Yeah, you know what? That's true. I agree. Anyways, that about does it for our weekly news cap. And now, without further ado, it is time for us to begin our exploration of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, we have to be clear. The MCU is
22 films. That's a
22
lot.
films. Yes.
And we have cut quite a few, I think it's around 5 or 6 from the timeline, mainly because they don't directly affect events, things like Spider-Man Homecoming, Iron Man 3, even Black Panther, which, while an amazing movie, did not have a huge impact on the MCU as a whole going forward.
Yes. Our main goal for this timeline is not necessarily to talk about what happens in every single movie. More so, we want to point out the key events throughout the timeline from 1945 up to current date to give you the idea of every single thing building up to what Endgame is all about. So that way, in case you've never watched a Marvel movie in your life and someone invited you to see Endgame, you at least have a general idea of the events that have happened leading up to it. Though, if that were the case, I would highly suggest that you try to watch a couple of the Marvel movies before you hop into Endgame. It's way more worth it if you do get to watch some of these first.
Yes. But still, here, our timeline's just going to be a recap, so you have the base knowledge going into Endgame. So why don't we get started with 1945, where Steve Rogers becomes Captain America and prevents Hydra from using the Tesseract, also known as the Space Stone, from launching a thermonuclear war across the globe. Steve Rogers manages to reclaim the Tesseract for the U.S., but gets lost in the Arctic Circle and is frozen for the next few decades.
It is also important to note that while Steve Rogers crashes into this glacier, the Red Skull, his main antagonist of the first Avenger, Captain America, he disappears while trying to handle the Tesseract. And we find out where he goes later on.
Yes, he gets beamed into space.
Yes. Now, next up would be 1985.
And this is a rough date because they never explicitly say what year it is in the movie, but I'm going with 85.
Yes. You go ahead and handle 85 because I'm afraid I haven't been able to see Captain Marvel just yet.
So Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, returns to Earth to prevent a Skrull shapeshifter invasion, where she finds the Tesseract, regains some of her lost memories, and returns the Tesseract to S.H.I.E.L.D. She then flies off into space to help the cosmos against the approaching Kree invasion.
You know, I heard Captain Marvel was a really good movie.
It was pretty good. It wasn't their best, but it was pretty good.
Yeah. You know, and that's good enough in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we now fast forward to the year 2008. The first installment of the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
The very first Iron Man movie. You see, in 2008, Tony Stark, a weapons manufacturer, after being kidnapped by terrorists and trapped into a cave, with only his own means of escape, he manages to create the Mark I Iron Man suit. After escaping from the terrorists and going back to his home, he starts manufacturing different versions, leading all the way up to his iconic red and gold Iron Man armor.
Mm-hmm.
After saving the world from another person who wished to create an army of Iron Man suits to sell off to terrorists, Nick Fury approaches Iron Man and informs him about the Avengers Initiative.
In the first post-credit sequence.
Yes. Now, go ahead and take away 2011, my friend.
Okay, fast forward 3 years to 2011, where Thor is banished to Earth due to starting a war between Asgard and the Frost Giants. He is stripped of his ability to use his hammer Mjolnir, and eventually he learns humility, the price of leadership, this and that. He regains Mjolnir and stops his brother Loki from taking over Asgard. Loki is then implied to have died by falling into a weird portal thing, but as we all know, world portal things never actually kill you. So anyway, Thor is now on Asgard, and Loki is somewhere.
It's also important to note that in the first Thor movie, after dealing with Loki, he also informs S.H.I.E.L.D. that he will be an ally for them in case they ever need his assistance on Earth.
Which is good.
Yes.
A year later, in 2012, it hits the fan. And
Oh my
I'll
God.
let you take this one.
Now, you see, in 2012, Loki attempts an invasion of Earth to recover the Tesseract. The Avengers defeat him, keeping the Tesseract, the Space Stone, and taking the Mind Stone from Loki, which he happened to have obtained in his staff. And this is also when we first see the Chitauri.
Yes, it's the first time we see the Chitauri, and it's the first time we see the person pulling the strings behind Loki, who gave him the Mind Stone in order to, help regain the Space Stone, Thanos. So this is the first appearance of Thanos. He doesn't actually say anything, and we don't know what his plans are yet, but we know there's something much larger and much more dangerous waiting out there.
Now, of course, it's important to note that 2012, of course, is a significant moment, for this is the very first meeting up of the Avengers. The first time they ever assemble and handle their threat. And it's established ever since then that they are the task force to call when all hope is almost lost, basically.
Yep, it's Captain America, Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Black Widow, and Hawkeye.
Yeah, the
That is-
iconic. Of course, there will be many more to join the roster later on.
But that is the original 6.
Yes. Now, I'll let you take on the next year.
Okay, in 2013, we go back to Thor, who is preventing a race known as the Dark Elves from recovering the Ether, also known as the Reality Stone, in order to wipe out the universe, was the best way I could understand it. It's sort of hard to tell. Thor the Dark World wasn't a great movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, Thor manages to recover the Ether, defeat the Dark Elves, and leaves it in the possession of the Collector, an alien that collects things. That's really what he does.
Yeah, it's as simple enough as that. Now, fast forward ahead to 2014. Captain America discovers Hydra has been manipulating S.H.I.E.L.D. for decades, as well as brainwashing Bucky Barnes to be their assassin. Now, you see, Bucky Barnes used to be basically his sidekick back in the old days when he was Captain America around World War II. He frees Bucky from his mind control, taking down Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. in the process, which would, in case you're interested, that's in the events of Captain America, the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
There's quite a couple of Captain America films throughout here, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, in the films, we don't really get to explore a lot of the consequences of S.H.I.E.L.D. being destroyed. We do actually get to see a lot of that in the TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which isn't on the timeline because it really doesn't affect anything in the movies, but is worth a watch, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Also, in 2014, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Star-Lord, Gamora, Drax, Rocket Raccoon, and Groot managed to stop a villain known as Ronin from obtaining the Power Stone, one of the many gems in the Infinity Stone, in order to commit cosmic genocide. Now, of course, the Guardians of the Galaxy were just barely formed, a ragtag group of criminals who decided to help out and whatnot, and they did manage to save the universe.
So by this point, we know where 4 of the stones are. The Space Stone and the Mind Stone are on Earth in the possession of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Hydra. It sort of depends on what's happening at the moment. The Reality Stone is in the possession of the Collector, and the Power Stone is turned over by the Guardians to the Nova Corps on Xandar. So that's 4 out of 6.
Now, to 2015. Tony Stark, in order to try and prevent a future disaster, accidentally uses the Mind Stone to create Ultron, which is this advanced AI which is supposed to be able to help with potential disasters.
Imagine Tony Stark, but made of metal and evil.
Yes, much more maniacal, a lot more, cold, logical and whatnot.
Still very witty.
Still very witty. A lot of puns. The Avengers managed to defeat Ultron, along the way creating Vision, an artificial human powered by the Mind Stone. Now, it's important to pay attention to that, for he plays a very key role later on in another Avengers film.
They also team up with Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, twins with the ability to... Quicksilver can run super fast, and Scarlet Witch can glow at things and make them explode,
She kind of has, like, magic, basically.
Yeah, it's essentially magic, and Quicksilver does end up dying over the course of Age of Ultron to protect Hawkeye.
Yeah. Also in this year, the Guardians of the Galaxy prevent Ego, Star-Lord's dad, who also happens to be a living planet, from absorbing all life in the universe. And this is around the time that we find out that Star-Lord isn't necessarily entirely a human being, but is in fact part God, I believe, yes?
Celestial.
Celestial,
which
right.
is kind of God in the Marvel Universe. Or, there are so many tiers of gods in the Marvel Universe, it's hard to keep track. They're above Thor, but below the multiversal gods. So,
okay, around like Galactus level then, yeah?
Yeah, I'd say about Galactus level.
About Galactus level, okay. Also, around this year, Scott Lang, a burglar who's trying to reform his life, teams up with Hank Pym, a very, very intelligent scientist who managed to discover a little thing known as Pym particles, which allows people to alter the size of any object while still keeping the molecular density of its original size. And he also meets his daughter, Hope Van Dyne. Now, they team up together in order to try and prevent the Yellow Jacket suit, a version of the Ant-Man suit, which Scott Lang wears. And he now is Ant-Man, a person with the ability to shrink very small or grow very large, but still have the ability to obtain the strength of an average-sized person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you go ahead and take away the next year, man.
Okay, and now we get to 2016, and the first event is the Civil War, in which is essentially the Avengers split over ideological differences. There's a split in belief on how they should be controlled. One faction led by Iron Man believes that they need an incredible amount of oversight by the UN and
the Sokovia Accords.
The Sokovia Accords in response to events from the past movies, such as the destruction of Sokovia in Age of Ultron, the high death rates that seem to follow their missions, and in protecting the world, do they cause more damage than they should? So Iron Man, and others want more oversight, while Captain America and his faction believe that they could be abused. That's what if the UN wants them to do something that isn't necessarily right?
It was a clash between romanticism and realism, basically.
Essentially.
Yes.
So the Avengers split over this, and Captain America, Black Widow, Falcon, many other superheroes essentially become fugitives to the world.
It's also important to note that this is when Spider-Man is introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes, as part of Iron Man's faction.
Not necessarily an Avenger just yet, but on his way to doing so.
Yes, and Stephen Strange, after getting in an accident, a brilliant surgeon who, after getting in an accident, loses the use of both hands, learns the magical arts in order to essentially regain the use of his hands. He manages to defeat the evil Dormammu, a multi-dimensional cloud.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, and becomes the new Guardian of the Time Stone, which is now the 5th Infinity Stone we know of.
Yes. Now, 2017. Asgard is destroyed, with Thor leading the survivors as their new king.
Yes, the events of Thor Ragnarok aren't super important, but essentially what happens is Thor's sister breaks out of hell, kills everyone, and in order to stop her, Thor has to allow Asgard to explode, essentially. That's the actual plot of that movie.
That is the actual plot, but they do take refuge on Earth, though, later on, yes.
In the comics, yes, they do. We don't know exactly where they're going to go right now because of the events in 2018. So, first off in 2018, Scott Lang, Hank Pym, and Hope Van Dyne create the Quantum Tunnel, a device capable of accessing the quantum realm, a subspace universe, essentially, where time acts differently.
Yes.
So, They managed to do that. They managed to rescue Hope's mother, Janet Van Dyne. And then it's the events of Infinity War.
Infinity War.
Do you want to take this?
Yes. Yes, I will. Now, you see, Infinity War is when we're introduced to Thanos.
Yes.
A mad titan who was introduced near the end credits of the first Avengers film. And in Age of Ultron, we realize that he is going to be the wielder of the Infinity Gauntlet. A mechanism, a gauntlet, basically, which can contain the power of all the Infinity Gems. And once he obtains all these gems, he seeks to snap his fingers in order to eliminate 50% of all life in the entire universe. Now, this is, of course, a very insane idea, but Thanos, of course, sees this as perfectly logical.
Yes.
Now, the Avengers, they do their very best to try and take on Thanos. They even team up with the Guardians of the Galaxy. You know, almost everybody who could come in to assist try their best to take on Thanos, many times. Unfortunately, there are a couple of casualties. Gamora is killed off in order to obtain the Soul Stone, which has been guarded by the Red Skull ever since he had disappeared after the events of the first Avenger.
Yes. Thanos also attacks the planet Xandar, apparently wiping out half the population and claiming the Power Stone, as well as attacking the surviving Archivist Guardians, wiping out half of the survivors of the obliteration of Asgard, as well as taking the Power Stone and killing Loki.
Of course, they do one final match to try and take on Thanos, and they're so close to getting the gauntlet off of Thanos until Star-Lord ends up hitting Thanos in rage after finding out that his love, Gamora, has been murdered. Due to this, Thanos snaps out of it, he obtains the gauntlet, and then the event that all pop culture refers to as the snap.
Yes, Thanos. He returns to Earth. He has 5 of the 6 stones, the last one being the Mind Stone that's stuck in Vision's head. He manages to claim it, in the process killing Vision. And then he snaps.
He snaps, and right afterwards, he wins the Infinity War. 50% of all life, including half of the Avengers roster, fades off into dust.
Yes. It should also be noted that during this time, Scott Lang has been exploring the quantum realm. However, all the people, Hank Pym, Hope Van Dyne, and Janet Van Dyne that could pull him out disappear in the snap. So he's now stranded in the quantum realm.
Yes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that about wraps up our timeline for now. We're not going to go in depth onto the events of Endgame because we want you to watch the movie yourself. We want you to get your own opinion on it.
Next week, we will be doing a review of Endgame. We will probably be doing spoilers, but we will be doing it at the end of the episode, so we'll give you plenty of warning. You know, you won't be missing anything if you want to, if you still haven't seen it.
Yes. However, before we wrap up today's episode, I kind of just want to talk about the whole, what's been referred to now as the Infinity Saga. You see, for me, the whole MCU has been very important to me. Well, not necessarily like super important, but it's been a key part. It's been 11 years of films. That's almost half my life. You know, I'm 22, going to be 23 this year. I remember growing up still in elementary school, and I got to see the first Iron Man when that came out. And I was so excited for it, but I had no idea at the time that it was going to spin out into this amazing cinematic universe. You know, and I can only imagine that for other people, such as myself, who have been able to watch all these movies and been so invested into what's going on with the Avengers and whatnot, it's very important to watch this film because it's kind of like seeing a huge part of your childhood finally come to a conclusion. And not in a bad way, but just in a way that makes you feel good. You know, like it ended on a very good note.
Yeah, I watched Iron Man, the first movie, back right after I moved to Stockton in 2008. And honestly, I didn't have any idea how big this would be, but I also remember sitting in the theater the Friday Avengers opened and just being amazed because I never imagined I'd get to see something like this on the big screen, something that adapts what I love so perfectly just up there.
Right.
And that was an amazing feeling.
It really was. It was the first time ever since the X-Men that we finally got to see all these amazing superheroes come together to deal with a major threat. I got to see the Avengers in theaters as well, and I was really excited for it. The first Marvel movie I got to see in theaters was Captain America: The First Avenger, and it got me excited for the MCU. It made me a hardcore fan of Captain America. It even almost made me want to join the military at one point in time because how patriotic the movie made you feel and everything. And that's the thing with these movies. All of them, they make you feel a certain way. They're not just some pointless superhero movie. They all have a general message that they want you to feel, And with Endgame, it gives you the feeling of just comfort, I guess, because it's coming to an end. And like I said earlier, not in a bad way,
Yeah. It is not a perfect movie, but it is far better than I could ever have imagined them making this movie. It sticks to the landing. It knows what came before it and wraps that all up. I don't really have any bad feelings about this movie, and I think that's rare.
Same here. I have no criticisms. Nobody stole the spotlight. Not even Thanos, the main villain, was able to steal the spotlight. Every single hero in that movie gets their shining moment. That's why everyone's so adamant about nobody spoiling this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important. It's not like Civil War, I'm a huge fan of Civil War, but it's not as significantly important to the MCU as Endgame is. Everybody is in it. Everybody. And every single person fulfills their purpose perfectly.
Yeah, Endgame isn't just a story to be told. It is an experience to be had. It is the feeling of sitting in that theater, watching everything wrap up. And that's what Endgame is. It's not just, watching the next chapter in a story. It's experiencing the final chapter of the story.
Right. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that about does it for today's episode of The Phone Booth.
Shorter episode, but there wasn't really a lot of news this week, because I think the entire entertainment industry has sort of just been holding their breath leading up to this.
Yeah, it's been long. It's a long time coming, but it's finally been here. Now, as always, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ed Heitman. Joining me in the studio, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Brian Rodriguez.
See you next week.
Be sure to tune in next week where we go in depth onto Avengers Endgame. Spoilers in that episode. There were no spoilers in this episode. But be sure to tune in next week and every Saturday from 1 to 2 here on the Voice of San Joaquin. And without further ado, have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.